When we talk about just transition, there's a common phrase that's used: there are no jobs on a dead planet. Ecological sustainability is the bedrock to everything that we do in the world. Without it, people cannot thrive, let alone they cannot breathe. It is therefore essential that any conversation that focuses on solidarity between people places the environment at the centre of these conversations in terms of how do we create a more just but also a more livable planet. The values of ecological sustainability and social justice are intertwined. The objective of the People's Transition Initiative that TASC works on is to co-create solutions with communities to understand what are their challenges and needs, how do they relate to the environment, and how can we develop solutions that improve conditions for both people and the planet. The basic idea behind the People's Transition and the work that TASC does is that for climate action to be fast, it must be fair. For it to be enduring, it must be inclusive. As we've heard already from the sessions earlier today, people across the country and across the world are facing many immediate needs, whether that be things like housing, healthcare, employment, or access to basic public services. As well as that, certain segments in society face additional needs, whether that be with regards to structural disadvantage or whether it relates to geographical disadvantage. Because of these reasons, there is the risk that ecological sustainability and the environment is not seen as an immediate need. It's something that people have more pressing issues, therefore the environment is just something in the background. Despite what could be benefits for our economy, our environment, our society in terms of reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, developing renewable energy, for example, we've seen over recent weeks that this frustration can lead to reactive outcomes rather than positive, proactive changes. One very clear example of that was calls for the removal of the carbon tax, as if that was the solution to all of our problems, whereas in reality it was only one small element which could make a difference. As we've been seeing around Europe, and probably something which is growingly relevant here in Ireland, groups who view climate action as something that harms people's day-to-day lives are gaining power. One really powerful example of that is in the Czech Republic. The current Minister for the Environment is the leader of a party called Motorists for Themselves, and they position climate action as something which impacts or reduces the liberty of people, that it reduces the choices that you can make, and it is something that will lead to negative outcomes. Despite that, if we're completely reliant on cars, it means that first of all, we won't be immune from the impacts of increase in costs because of petrol and diesel, but also it has a structural disadvantage in terms of the people who aren't able to drive, whether that be due to a disability, whether that be due to their age. If cars are the only option, they won't be able to access important services. So that is why it's essential that ecological sustainability and climate justice and social justice are intertwined with one another. I think on that topic, a really interesting debate that's been happening recently is with regards to re-wetting and the private ownership and usage of bogs for turf cutting, because that's an example of where ecological sustainability has been developed into a politicised topic whereby reducing people's ability to cut their own turf is seen as something which is coming from urban Ireland telling rural Ireland what to do, rather than trying to develop a solution that will have benefits for both people and the environment. What I suppose brought me to this whole topic of climate justice, and I completed a master's and a PhD on the topic, is the potential for climate action to support rural regeneration along the idea of the Green New Deal in the United States. And I suppose why I mentioned that is I think it really goes to the heart of this whole idea of radical hope, in terms of rather than climate action being seen as something that reduces people's liberty or their freedom in terms of how they live, how they work, how they travel and so on. It is something that focuses on the immediate needs. How do we improve employment? How do we improve standard of living in rural areas? And how do we provide support for the people who are being left behind in the current economic structures which we're currently living in? Civil society organisations need to develop a vision and a change agenda for how the economy and society can be created where ecological sustainability is viewed as something which provides freedom to people, rather than the whole idea of it takes away people's rights. Civil society organisations need to take steps to understand, learn and respond to the challenges of linking these values between ecological sustainability and social justice in order to create a new kind of vision where the focus is on cooperation between groups to provide a more sustainable and a fairer and a more just future. As well as thinking about how we can make these changes from a policy perspective, Consideration is also needed for how organisations can embed these new principles into their organisation practices and programmes and the work which they wish to pursue. So thank you very much, and I hope this provokes some engagement.